matter that has already been decided at the level of the National Assembly cannot be discussed again until you rescind that particular decision. But for 29.3, it gives authority that you can only do that by ensuring that a notice is given for the rescinding of a motion that is done within a particular session, during a particular session. That's what it says. So it has not given any authority to decide on a motion that had taken place during another session, at a preceding session, in a successive session. It does not have that. And if you are to introduce a motion, you must quote a standing order. And there was no such standing order. And this is where the creativity of parliamentary democracy is all about. This is where discretion comes. This is where precedence comes, both at the level of the courts and at the level of parliament. So I thought that I was being creative by relying on Standing Order 8. And Standing Order 8 is simply emphasizing the creativity, and I'll show you the creativity that could have been injected in the process. It actually states that the Speaker of the National Assembly is the authority that should be able to decide on such matters. And how does it put it? Listen very carefully to its words. It says, in all cases, no exception, where matters are not expressly provided by these standing orders, any question or procedure or order shall be decided by the Speaker. There was no provision that shows that you can make a motion to rescind a decision of another session. It is not in our standing orders. But our standing orders say, if something is not expressly stated, and that is the reality with the motion that I wanted to make, then the Speaker has full authority to decide. And that is precisely why I made a motion for the Speaker to decide. And we will examine the decision. And I will summarize it. So essentially, that was the purpose for introducing my motion. And why did I introduce it? Since we have power to rescind a decision during a session, now we wanted to create a precedent that will also enable us to rescind a decision of another session. That's all I was seeking from the Speaker and from the National Assembly members. And why was that necessary? Because they are talking about the constitution building process. They've even invited an international delegation to do what? What mediation? This is about a bill to be brought to the National Assembly, to be decided by 3/4 majority before we can proceed to the next stage and even to a referendum. That is a parliamentary matter. You needed a consultation between the executive and parliament to resolve this matter. Now, when I introduced that motion, the Speaker's ruling is that I have not proven urgency. That is one. But what is more fundamental to me is that at the end of the ruling, the Speaker strayed into a matter that is purely for the judiciary and not for Parliament. The Speaker indicated that this matter, the Constitution having been blocked, is now dead. But what is funny, a Constitution that is dead, the Speaker is saying that it can be reintroduced. Something that is dead, you will breathe life to it and introduce it again by cabinet or by members of the National Assembly. This is the second coming of a constitution. Where in the Constitution has it said under Section 101 or Standing Order 62 where it says that a bill may be introduced by the President, Vice President, or a member, or a minister, or a member of the National Assembly? May be introduced. Well, there is no statement talking about reintroduction. Wherever you introduce something, then that is not dead. And this is where their flaw lies in interpretation. Because what is dead cannot be reintroduced. It is dead. And that's what I recognize. That by our decision, in September, they killed the Constitution. And since it is dead, if you want to bring another bill that deals with a constitution, you must go through the same process as determined by Section 226 of the Constitution. It means that that bill must be published in the Gazette for 3 months in the first instance, and a second publication for not less than 10 days before its introduction into the National Assembly. When is that going to happen? They say there is no urgency in what I was saying. But then, if with all the advisors of the executive, international, everywhere, there is nothing they can do except 2 things. What I said, which they have rejected so far, and to introduce another bill of the Constitution of the Republic of Gambia, promulgation bill. And it will take that process before it is introduced. And if it is introduced, where is the guarantee that you will have the 3/4 majority for it to continue? And it must continue up to the 3rd stage before it is handed over to the IEC for a referendum. When will that referendum happen? This is what I saw. That therefore, we must rescue the process. And to be able to rescue the process, Parliament has the powers to rescue the process if we had the will, the political will to do so. That is why that was introduced, that the route of the executive is going to be a long one and also unpredictable. But the route of the legislature have already been taken. We know the disagreements. If we rescinded on our decision, then we go back to the negotiation, right there in Parliament. Some were misconceived, some opinions were misconceived, they will be clarified. The properly conceived what will be considered and will be creative, because ultimately, whatever contradiction that exists, it is the judiciary that must solve it. And everybody is on board that we need a constitution of a third republic, even in a form that may be amended here and there to suit all of us. What is not disagreeable to all of us can always be amended. So that was my consideration. That is why I introduced the motion. The second leg of talking about reintroduction that has no basis in law But the issue of urgency has a base in the standing orders because it is the discretion of the Speaker that matters in that sense. I must say, where something is expressly stated in law, there is no basis of discretion. Where something is expressly stated in the standing orders, there is no basis of discretion. But what is not made impermissible by law, impermissible by the standing orders, the basis of discretion is there. And Standing Order 8, in fact, asserts that, and I quoted it. So it's purely within the discretion of the Speaker to have granted me leave. Admissibility under our standing orders must be properly situated. It has 5 bases of making a particular motion inadmissible. One, the motion must infringe the standing orders, number 1. Number 2, it must infringe the Constitution. Number 3, it must be so long that nobody can follow it. Number 4, it must affront the dignity of the National Assembly. And number 5, it must be something that makes allegation that cannot be substantiated. Clearly, those 5 bases. Look at the motion I made. You cannot say that it infringed on the Constitution, nor that it was long, nor that it affronts the dignity of the National Assembly. You cannot also say that it was something that stated something that could not be substantiated. So there is no basis of rejecting the admissibility of the statement except on the discretion of the Speaker that this was not an urgent matter requiring for him to allow the motion to be passed. Well, there's a difference in opinion. And I reserve the right to my opinion, he reserves the right to his opinion, and the public will judge, posterity will judge. I am convinced that constitution building is a matter of urgency. And the blockage we face, and the fact that the executive could only take a long route, which is uncertain, unpredictable, makes my motion urgent, because we already had a motion that took a given form for the bill to reach a given stage. If we rescinded our decision, it means that we know exactly the problems we are dealing with, and those known problems could have been easily addressed. That was the basis of my motion. I would not want to continue to bore you with other issues, but if you allow me, I will put in the public space precisely what I intended to submit to the National Assembly members for their decision. And allow me to read it for your sake and for posterity. It is a motion to rescind National Assembly decision not to support the second reading of the Constitution of the Gambia, Promulgation Bill 2020, on the basis of 3/4 majority required by Section 226 of the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia. Having regard to Standing Order 8 of the Standing Orders, which states, in all cases where matters are not expressly provided for by the Standing Orders, any questions on procedure or order shall be decided by the Speaker. Having regard to paragraph 2, which adds, the decision made in paragraph 1 shall be based on the Constitution, statute law, the precedents, customs, procedures, traditions, and practices of the Assembly. And D, the precedents, customs, procedures, traditions, and practices of other jurisdictions to the extent that they are applicable in the Assembly. Having regard to Section 101, subsection 1 of the Constitution, which states, subject to the provisions of this section, a bill or motion may be introduced in the National Assembly by a member of the Cabinet or by a member of the National Assembly, and the National Assembly shall give consideration to the bills and motions so introduced. Shall give consideration, underline the word. When a bill is introduced into the National Assembly, it may be allocated, having regard to subsection 5 of Section 101 of the 1997 Constitution, which adds, when a bill is introduced into the National Assembly, it may be allocated to an appropriate committee for examination, and a report made thereon to the National Assembly. This is the Constitution talking. We'll send bills to committees. Having regard to Standing Order 62, paragraph 8, which states, the provision in Standing Order 62 to 79 shall apply to government bills, committee bills, and members' bills, unless otherwise provided for herein. Having regard to the fact that the consideration and committee stage of the bill are stipulated in Section 101, subsection 1 and 5 of the 1997 Constitution, are clearly stipulated and sequenced under Standing Order 65 and 66 as follows. Standing Order 65. A bill shall be introduced by the person in charge of the bill by handing a copy of it to the clerk, and shall read about the short title, who shall read about the short title, whereupon the bill shall be deemed to have been read a fourth time. Order 66, paragraph 1 states, following the first reading, the stages in the Assembly's consideration of the bill shall be. What does shall be mean? Shall be second reading, a general debate on the bill with an opportunity for all members to vote on the general principles. Vote on the general principles, not the details. And that's the second reading. Committee stage. Detailed investigation by a committee followed by a report to the Assembly. A bill may be committed to a select, standing, or special select committee, or to a committee of the whole Assembly. D, consideration stage. Consideration of an opportunity for members to vote on the detailed clauses of the bill, including amendments to the bill. Consideration stage is taken by the Assembly. Third reading, passing or rejection of the bill without further amendment. So you could go through all this process, and at the third reading, you may decide something else. But let me continue with my reading. Having regard to Section 226 of the Constitution, which provides for a second and third reading of a bill aimed at altering the Constitution. Having regard to subsection 9 of Section 26 of the 1997 Constitution, which states, in this section, in references to the Constitution include references to any law that amends or replaces any of the provisions of this Constitution. B, references to the alteration of this Constitution include references to the amendment, modification, the enactment with or without amendment or modification of the Constitution or of any provision for the time being contained in this Constitution, the suspension or repeal or the making of different provision in lieu thereof, and the addition of new provisions to this Constitution. Having regard to Section 226, subsection 2, 3, 4, which stipulates how the Constitution could be altered either by a bill passed by the National Assembly and assented to by the President after being supported on the second and third reading by the votes of not less than 3/4 of the members of the National Assembly, or through a referendum before passing of the bill and the presentation to the President for his or her assent in case of amendments of specific provisions of the Constitution. Having regard to Section 226, subsection 4 and 7, which restrict the power of the National Assembly to pass a bill altering the following provisions unless the bill is subjected to a referendum. Subsection 4 applies to this section, meaning Section 226, my input there, Sections 1 and 79, subsection 2, which relate to the sovereignty of the Gambia, Section 4, 5, 1, and 6, 2, which relates to the Constitution as the supreme law of the Gambia, Section 8, 13, 4, which relates to citizenship, Chapter 4, which provides for the protection of fundamental rights and freedom, Section 39, 142, 147, which relates to elections and the Independent Electoral Commission, Section 63, 1, and the fourth sentence of Section 71, 2, which relate to the term of the President and the qualifications for ministers, Section 85, 4, and 167, which relate to the Director of Public Prosecutions and the independence of the Auditor General, Section 87 and 100, which relate to the National Assembly and the legislative power, Section 121 and 2A, 2 and 13, 121, 1, 123, 126, 2, 128, 130, 132, 133, 135, and 136, 138, 1 and 4, which relate to the judicature, the judiciary, Section 149, 1 and 151, 1, which relates to taxation and the withdrawal of money from public funds, and Section 193, 1, which relates to local government. Having regard to Section 193, 226, subsection 2 and 3 of the Constitution, which permits the amendment of all other provisions not mentioned under subsection 7 without a referendum. Having regard that the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia 2020 Promulgation Bill 2020 sought to repeal every provision of the 1997 Constitution in its entirety to a referendum by relying solely on Section 226 of the Constitution, which does not provide for such holistic alteration of all the provisions of the Constitution to a referendum. Having regard to Section 102 of the 1997 Constitution, which indicates, in addition to the other powers conferred on the National Assembly, this Constitution or any other law, the National Assembly shall have power to include in a bill a proposal for a referendum on an issue of national concern defined in the bill. Having regard to Section 100 of the Constitution, which states the legislative power of the Gambia shall be exercised by bill passed by the National Assembly and assented to by the President. Whereas the National Assembly has all the powers to alter or facilitate the altering, repealing of the Constitution and the promulgation of a Constitution in lieu of the 1997 Constitution by relying on Section 102 and Section 226 of the Constitution and stating new precedents and setting new precedents. Whereas the Constitutional Review Commission Act 2017 is an act enacted by the National Assembly and the President to provide the establishment of a Constitutional Review Commission to draft and guide the process of promulgating a new constitution for the Gambia and for connected matters. Whereas Section 21 of the Act orders that the Commission shall, upon completion of its work, submit a constitution, propose new constitution, and a report thereon in originals to the President. Whereas upon the submission of the draft constitution and report to the President, the Commission has published the proposed constitution and report as provided for under Section 21, subsection 2 of the Constitutional Review Commission Act. whereas such a proposed new constitution cannot be promulgated without the laying of a bill before the National Assembly aimed at altering all the provisions of the 1997 Constitution by way of a holistic repeal and enacting the clauses of the proposed new constitution by way of holistic promulgation. Whereas the Minister of Justice had introduced the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia 2020 Promulgation Bill 2020 for the first reading before the National Assembly, whereas the Minister of Justice did move a motion for the second reading of the bill on 22nd September 2020, followed by a debate on the general merits and principles by the National Assembly members, whereas any of the provisions of the Constitution could be amended and new provisions added in the 1997 Constitution, either by passing a Constitution Amendment Bill for assent by the President or by approving a Constitution Amendment Bill for referral to the Independent Electoral Commission for a referendum, whichever provision is applicable under the terms and conditions set under Section 226 of the 1997 Constitution, whereas the National Assembly has the sole power to consider any bill to alter the 1997 Constitution in its entirety by remitting it to a committee which is embodied with power to take evidence, scrutinize details, and recommend amendments before the consideration of a bill, clause by clause, by the Assembly at its start reading. Whereas Section 102 and Section 108 of the Constitution have given powers to the National Assembly to rely on its committees and standing orders to provide remedy to any constitutional vacuum in the exercise of its lawmaking powers. Whereas Section 226 of the Constitution provides for the approval on the second and third reading before any alteration of the Constitution could take place with or without a referendum. Whereas Standing Order 68 provides for a bill to be referred to the Assembly Business Committee for committal to a relevant committee, including Committee of the Whole Assembly, for detailed scrutiny if the motion on the second reading is carried. Whereas on the 22nd of September 2020, the motion for the second reading of the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia 2020 Promulgation Bill 2020 was not supported by the 3/4 majority required by the Constitution for the bill to proceed to the committee stage. Whereas Section 22 of the Constitutional Review Commission Act 2017 aimed to transform the members of the Commission into subject matter specialists who would be obliged to attend committee meetings of the Assembly to clarify any matter and answer any question relating to the clauses of the proposed new constitution. Whereas an impasse has been created in the constitutional reform process by the 22nd September 2020 decision of the National Assembly. Whereas such impasse could be rolled back by rescinding the decision taken by the National Assembly on 22nd September 2020 to reject the motion for the second reading, in the spirit of unlocking the potential in all National Assembly members to rise up to any occasion aimed at upholding and defending the viability and integrity of the Assembly and the supreme interest of the Gambia, our homeland, I move with all the solemnity and humility I could muster that this August National Assembly rescinds its decision of 22nd September 2020 to reject the second reading of the bill entitled the Constitution of the Republic of Gambia Promulgation Bill 2020. I further move as follows, that upon rescinding its decision, the Assembly prevails on the Minister of Justice to withdraw the bill or the motion for the second reading in order to review the provision of the Constitution and the processes under which the standing orders and the processes under the standing orders that are applicable in facilitating the promulgation of new Constitution and the repealing of the one in force in full consideration with the National Assembly and in full consultation also with the National Assembly. That the Assembly Business Committee be charged with the responsibility of assigning the relevant committee with the task of reviewing Section 22 of the Constitutional Review Commission Act in order to prescribe the role of the Constitutional Review Commission during the committee stage of the National Assembly aimed at reviewing the schedule of the bill embodying the proposed new constitution. That the Assembly convenes a special session to dispose of the Constitutional Review Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia 2020 Promulgation Bill 2020 and all other bills within its remit in January 2021. That is the motion that I sought leave from the Speaker to make. And that is the motion that was denied. It is now left to posterity to be the judge. Thank you very much. Any question? I will answer. Yes, state your institution, your name.
Thank you very much. My name is Mr. Taylor for Ghana Online News. Really appreciate you taking the time for this press conference. My first question, do you believe there is enough time to reintroduce the Constitution bill in early 2021 in time for a referendum before that 6-month deadline for the presidential election? First, is that a possibility? My second question, the first time you tabled a motion to receive the $54 million loan, it was rejected. And this week, your motion to revive the Constitution has been rejected again. Twice in the space of a month or so. Do you consult other NAMs or go into caucuses to sway those sitting on the fence, and those on the other end of the spectrum, just to understand?
Well, the first question is why I introduced the motion in the first place. Because the reintroduction of a bill is out of the question. Once a bill is dead, it's dead. Now is to introduce a bill which will be dealing with the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia. Whether they're going to plagiarize what has been provided by the CRC and produce a new document that they believe that is a consensus document, whatever, but that must be transformed into a bill and must be published in the Gazette for 3 months in the first instance, for not less than 10 days in the second instance before it is introduced in the National Assembly. So I believe you can imagine what my answer would be. In the first place, would you even expect that bill to go past that second stage again? And look at the risk that we are taking in that. Are we really determined to have the constitution of a third republic? I think that is the question that should be asked to every Gambian. And if we are, then now is the time that we look at the shortcut to that. And Parliament provided a shortcut. And not only a shortcut, it would have been a landmark precedent being created, and that landmark precedent would have saved the constitutional building process. So that's what I thought Parliament would do. Consultation, well, essentially the mind of Parliament should not in any way be influenced by anybody but by law, conscience, and the national interest. And I believe you hear me stating that over and over again, that whatever we do, we must be dictated by law, conscience, and the national interest. For example, we even as a party, we do not tell our representatives what to do, because once they are in the National Assembly, they are no longer party representatives. They are there representing the Gambian people. So we ask them to really decide and vote on the basis of the dictates of conscience and the national interest. So that type of consultation that people often make in caucuses really does not exist. And to be honest with you, I think that has made the Gambian parliament unique. Because in many parliaments, we even have whips that the caucuses really control the member. And you risk being isolated by not doing what the caucus says. But what I was trying to do here now is that I think you've seen the recommendation I made. It is to give possibility to precisely that, since we now know the different minds in Parliament, and we want to save a constitution, the minds will be directed by one interest to save a constitution. And therefore, we should be able to sit down and discuss. So I believe that this was an opportunity. I don't think it's the only opportunity. We'll be exploring still opportunities for Parliament to act in January to be able to save the constitutional process. I intend to still pursue that. And now it offers, because what is blocked by the Speaker. Is not opposed by the members. So we have not sought the mind of the members. So I don't know how they will vote on this, but I believe many will vote favorably to rescind. That's what I believe, based on the contacts that I saw in the National Assembly. Others may oppose if they don't know, but I think hearing the content, many minds may change. So that parliamentary discourse should continue under the circumstances. I wouldn't mind engaging in a consultative process if I'm really invited to do so. And I think you know what invitation means. If I see it in the eyes of people that they want consultation, I don't want to pressurize anybody to go against one's conscience. I think have I answered your question, Philip? Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Fatou Jr. I work with the Fatou Network. The question that I have is a very specific one for you as a National Assembly member. Gambians would say there is no National Assembly without Honorable Halifa Sallah. And this, they say, is as a result of the fact that for decades now, people have been seeing you trying to fight to have what we call a Gambia that we want, the democratic Gambia that we want. And this, the Constitution is very vital to play in something like that. But then we've seen you having blocks or having barriers to be able to achieve this, what you're fighting for. How does this make you feel as a NAM member in this country?
Well, I think that I would not have been a National Assembly member if I did not believe that there is something to contribute. Once I come to the decision that what I know is known by everybody, I think I should retire. Don't you think so? Even though that may not be the case at the moment, but still I've declared that this is my last term in the National Assembly because I believe I have done everything that I could in terms of parliamentary democracy, and my stay there would no longer be as relevant as it is now. But looking at post-2016, I was convinced that that was my place. And now I am more than ever convinced that that's my place. And of course, if there is no obstacle, there can be no fight. If there is no blockade, there will be no fight. So I think the blockade is what I expected. That's why the fight exists. And I believe that I am fit for purpose in carrying out that fight. And that is why the fight is not an obstacle. I think it's a revelation of the challenges that we really need to overcome in order for the country to progress on the route of greater democracy. That is important because Parliament is the bastion of democracy. Just imagine in our adjournment debate. Some members just stood and said that, well, let's adjourn without a debate. Then it was put, and the majority supported, and that terminated the adjournment debate. When, if you look at the standing orders of Parliament, it is saying that your quorum is half the members. And once Parliament starts, the quorum is quarter. So if there is a quarter ready to continue, why should those who want to leave, those who do not want to speak, why should those people abrogate the rights of those people? So these are the issues that I must put in the public space, and we must put at the level of Parliament to combat and change so that our standing orders will be written to oppose all that. So we're in the process of building, and you cannot build until you identify the contradictions, the obstacles, then work to overcome them. That is the process. We should become more dynamic now that knowing that these are the obstacles, they must be fought, they must be changed. That is the battle.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kalina Salam. I am Kevin as guest. Going by the Speaker's ruling, it outlined that the decision of the Assembly on the said bill was made in the third ordinary session, and that is going to the 2nd September, and not in the fourth ordinary session, which you have bring the motion. And this was based on that you have rejected your motion for him to give you leave to continue laying down the motion. And the second ruling indicates that you didn't indicate the urgency in your bill. So what is your reaction on this ruling about this question that I asked?
Well, I believe that those issues he raised are credible. That is his opinion. He is the one who should exercise his discretion. I had raised, he has sort of mentioned that this decision took place during the third ordinary session. It did not take place during the current fourth session. Well, I've already alluded to that in my motion. I stated precisely what Standing Order 29.3 says, that it is specific to a given session and you can rescind a decision made during that current session. I've already said that. And because I stated that, it shows that I wanted that to be set aside in terms of understanding my motion. And my motion really was based more on Standing Order 8. And I don't think I need to read that for you again, because it shows that where something is not expressly stated in the standing orders, it is the sole power of the Speaker to decide. And the motion I made, which he has mentioned, and he has not mentioned my position, he has not mentioned Standing Order 8 at all, which means that whoever wrote this does not even want to understand my motion, because if you are making a judgment, at least you should state my case, and my case was not about 29.3. I already understood that. That's why I stated it, so that they know that I understand that. That's what it says. But that's not about what I was moving my motion on. My motion was on something that the standing orders had nothing to say. And that is the flaw of his judgment, that because I made a motion for him to use his discretion on the basis of a provision which says that if nothing is stated by the standing orders, then the Speaker has full power to exercise his discretion. Well, I'm in order. He should have noted that. At least that should be stated in that even though that is the case, he's not convinced regarding urgency. That would be credible. But that issue of 29.3 has no basis. Is really should not have been part of his consideration. Now the issue, and he has every power to decide on what I said, because the Standing Order 8 has given him that. Now the next issue that he mentioned, I think is left to you people to consider. I think I've already addressed that, but the floor is open. That's what I have to say on those two elements. That in terms of the currency, well, that's his opinion. But as far as I'm concerned, nothing is more important than the constitution building process, especially if we consider the 123 million. Am I right? To those who have had the CRC, I'm not quoting from anything. I may be wrong also, but I think they said 116 million first, and then they increased it to 123 million. If I'm wrong, then CRC forgive me. That's correct. Yes, 123 million. So if you say that is not urgent, that document where you spend 123 million, if you say it's not urgent to save that document, well, I don't know what is urgent. But to me, that is urgent.
Thank you very much. You people are the National Assembly. You are not there by yourself. All you do is you have to follow the law. Because as far as your statement is being followed, Section 110 of the Constitution provides that whatever you do must be in the national interest, and that you are servants of the people. And then the constitutional building process was a thing that every government wanted. It's the thing that people choose for, people yearn for, and this is why the coalition, it was central in the coalition manifesto. And then when the government came, it has come to the level of National Assembly, and the National Assembly killed the bill. It's correct to say National Assembly killed the bill. So here, Ghanaians are at crossroads. National Assembly, you came, you want to push for a support, the speaker stopped it. Now the executive is thinking of engagement, and that engagement hasn't even started. So the possibilities that you have provided, do you think can be done before the end of December 2020? Because 2021 is the date set for election. Thank you.
Well, essentially, I believe that's why the urgency is again stipulated in your question, is embodied in your question. And every question I've had here is about urgency. So I think the urgency is already established. The fact that the executive has in fact looked for international mediation, that shows you the level of urgency. Why would you seek mediation if there's no urgency? So if they expect me to put all that in a motion to try to convince the speaker that the matter is urgent, well, I think that would be rather unfortunate, because I don't think that that is really necessary, because the mere statement that I have indicated to show the impasse and the desire to overcome it should have been sufficient to convince any speaker to try to at least work on the path of saving the Constitution. That is legislative intervention to save the Constitution, since it is that same legislature that blocked the route. I think that would have been very noble if that was done. But again, we must respect the decision. I do respect the decision, but I'm not convinced by it. And to answer your question, well, that's what I saw, that any delay, even the international consultation, how much do they know about our standing orders and constitution? They just get up and just get people together. What we know about our constitution, what we know about the standing orders, anybody, we have to at least help you to understand. And what the international committee must realize is that at the level of the National Assembly, the majority wanted the process to continue. So what is left is a minority that was not convinced, and even the majority, maybe they have some buts, but at least they wanted the process to continue to the committee stage. So which Gambian would not want this to proceed to the committee stage? And you've heard the quotation that at the third reading, you can support or reject. At the third reading, you can even reject it after all these stages. So what is the problem? Where does the problem lie? Is it the standing orders, the Constitution, or is it some people who simply want to block? Because even if you are opposed to it, allow it to go to the final stage and state your reasons why you would not want it to be the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia. Yes, I'm sorry that I'm taking too much time.
Yes, and the question I have is, aside from the issues raised by the speaker aside from the issues raised for the decisions taken by the speaker, do you think there is another motive that drives that decision aside from what was raised?
Well, I cannot really go into that, because that will be another terrain of suspicion, etc. I don't think you would want me to do that. I'm sure you'll want to save me from at least speaking my mind. What I can say plainly is that maybe my intention was not fully conceived as it should be conceived. Let me take it that way, so to allow room for more consultation and see whether we can still save the process. because the parliamentary democracy is about developing the procedures. And procedures can be developed by parliament. We have absolute power to make our standing orders. So if you have good parliamentarians, you will have genuine parliamentary democracy. But if you don't have parliamentarians who are committed to the national interest, who are dictated by conscience and the law, well, I'm afraid we will not be able to achieve the goals for which we brought the change. And my defense is there in the sense that I was there and I knew what we wanted. So if I see it sliding away, of course you can understand my urgency. Maybe for them it's not urgent, but for me it is urgent that what was fought for is actually found in practice so that posterity will judge us fairly.
From Grenada, with my editor here, Flex, obviously based in Washington State. I've known you for a very long time. You've dedicated 3/4 of your life or half of your life into public service. I want to know what motivates you, what keeps you awake, because it appears that every time you and others work very closely to get us to the next point, there comes a group of people that hijacks the process and takes us backward. You're human like us. You have emotions, you have family, you go home. What keeps you going forward? My second question is a follow-up to what my editor asked. Conventional norms, as you mentioned, parliamentarians are guided by law, by national interests, and the third one I know you mentioned, but also they're guided by political interests. And it appears that this is what happened in this case. The national interest appears to have been put aside, law appears to have been put aside, and political interest was put in the forefront. And therefore the draft constitution, which obviously does not satisfy everything, was killed at its infancy. I believe that it was, and this is my opinion, it was political interest. And this is why we think that it is necessary, and I can ask your opinion on that, whether you need to caucus within the National Assembly, because there's a lot of young people, as you said, they don't know anything about the standing orders. They don't know anything about the procedure, not anything. I don't mean to demonize them, but I mean they don't have the experience. Don't you think it is necessary to caucus, to consult those people before they're guided by politics that creates everything? Thank you very much for your service.
Well, thank you very much. I will still advise all of you so that we really understand the issues, and I'm free to answer all your questions. But if we look at the constitution building process, it will help your media houses so that at least we look at the urgency of the blockage in that regard. What makes me tick? Well, it's a mission and it's a vision. I believe that I'm driven by that mission that I had at the age of 16 and a half. I've always repeated that over and over again. Listening to Dr. Carmichael at Crab Island School, I made a decision then that this eloquent gentleman has inspired me so much. And he is from where he was oppressed, and where even a boss will discriminate the person of color. And he is in Africa to get inspiration, only to find an Africa which was in fact more backward than he ever would dream. And who kept Africa backward? Our very selves. So if we don't take charge of ourselves and build ourselves to be worthy of respect, how can we save the Africans in the diaspora? So that is my mission, and I think that mission will go on with me until I go to the grave. But what you have said must be looked at from two angles. Yes, we want conscience, we want national interest, we want law to guide every parliamentarian. But sometimes people can be guided by political interest. But you raise the question again, what is that political interest? What is there to really gain? Because development is about all of us. When Gambia changed in 2016, nobody believed that Gambia could have a peaceful transfer of power to the ballot. And when Gambia attained that, we became the darling of the whole world. Every Gambian, whether you contributed or did not contribute, every Gambian benefited. So that is the essence of building a country. All will benefit. And I would say that, well, consensus, you can see how we vote. Sometimes we all vote in one direction. When certain interests come, we divide. So I don't think caucus is the only instrument that can prevent that shift in thinking. I think interest is real, and we must always take note of that. But my underlying word is, how much are we really serving our interests by not building a constitution that is fit for purpose? When we have all the opportunity to do that, we can criticize it clause by clause. We can engage in a national debate at the level of the committee and move it forward. What interest is there that the person is serving? So maybe we should help people to understand that sometimes they are not really serving their interests. In fact, they may end up undermining the very integrity of the National Assembly. Because at this moment, the National Assembly is seen to be the blocker of the constitutional process. And would we live with that legacy up to 2021? I hope not.
Yeah, thank you. I think this will be my last question. I just want to do a devil advocate here, like one can say. If the motion was not allowed, was allowed by the speaker, for it to go to the second reading, which means that if we annul the second reading and the decision that has been made by the National Assembly during the second reading, and one might argue that that is not a good sample for a parliamentary democracy, because one will argue that since the bill is out of the parliament, to rescue back to the parliament, it can only happen by reintroduction of a bill by the parliament, but not by motion for the simple decision of the National Assembly. So I don't know what would be your reaction towards this, but this is the argument that most people have been.
Well, I think I have already debunked that argument. There can be no reintro. In fact, that statement I've said, made in the speaker's ruling, is very flawed. And if we had an adjournment debate, I would have debunked it. There can be no reintroduction of a bill that is dead. So that term reintroduction is a misstatement, and that is not fit for such a ruling. What can be is the introduction of a new bill. That's what we are talking about. But to introduce a new bill will require abiding by Section 226. And Section 226 is very clear that first and foremost, a bill that deals with constitutional amendments must be published in the Gazette for 3 months in the first instance, not less than 10 days in the second instance before you introduce it. That is the first dimension. So who is advising us to do that? Is one who is advising us to delay and derail the whole process. Because any delay in the process is moving very close to elections. So essentially, that is not good advice and is bad ruling. The situation is, don't advise people to do what I saw and sought to put aside and overcome by the introduction of the motion. So essentially, it is clear that any bill that deals with the Constitution must go through that process. And the uncertainty, who will say that if it is introduced, it will get 3/4 majority? Where is the certainty? So this is the issue that I'm emphasizing. I think that is very clear. And the other issue that you mentioned, what would it mean? Well, it shows parliamentary democracy, which is consolidated by respecting constitutions, respecting the standing orders, and also creating precedents that would be progressive. If you see George's, look at the United States, how conservatives and or the Republicans and the Democrats compete as to who will be appointed judge. It's because of the decisions. They are also human. So if you have people who are not progressive, the decision, because discretionary powers exist, and I don't think anybody doubts that. Order Standing Order 8 is very clear. I don't need to read it again. The discretionary powers is with the Speaker. So if you have a progressive ruling, then it impacts on future decisions. And in fact, you can even amend your standing orders in line with that particular provision. So that is this issue. If we had the decision, it would have really improved our procedures. And we would have guided the whole world. Can you imagine Gambia, the parliament saving the constitution? It means that whole Africa, whole world would have been publishing it.
Yes.
Could we, I know, as you can,
Yeah,
please, yes. Please.
My last two questions.
Yes.
So the first one is, you have spoken about the other efforts by an international delegation to revive the draft constitution. You said that there is nothing to sort of resolve, there is no, acrimony, I say. What's your position on the talks? Do you believe it's a way forward? My first question. Then the second question. Citizens Alliance presidential candidate Dr. Ismail Sisi has said that it will be a betrayal to go into the 2021 presidential elections without 50+1, second round voting, term limits. Does PDOIS have similar demands, or are you ready to go into the 2021 presidential elections without any changes?
Well, the first issue that you have raised, maybe let me take the second one. Well, when he says that, he is just reading the manifesto that Barrow has. So that is what the coalition was all about. Read the manifesto. You don't need a reinvention. This is the architecture of the coalition. So if it is not performed, well, you must identify who betrayed it. All of us have contract with destiny, and we should decipher who betrays destiny and who is absolved by destiny. So I believe that you already understand our position, because we are part of the very drafters of that manifesto. And not only that, we have fought here as the opposition, and go back to the recommendations of GOFA. Very statements is there in GOFA's recommendation when we were dealing with ex-President Jammeh. Those were the fundamental recommendations made. So essentially, are we ready to go into elections if those issues are not handled? Well, we went to elections in 2016 when the situation went worse. We asked for electoral reform, and instead of electoral reform, we were told that to register a political party, you must now pay $1 million. To be able to stand for election, you must have 500,000 as a presidential candidate. As a National Assembly, you must have 50,000 times 53 seats of the National Assembly. You can imagine what a party would have to pay. So essentially, there are blockages everywhere, but what ultimately happened is that we went to election and we won. So our lesson is different from his lessons. Our lesson is that we struggle to build democracy, but when it comes to contest, we look at what we are fighting for, and we set strategies and tactics to be able to achieve.
International delegation.
Yes, the international delegation, we sympathize with them. We most likely they have not, because these are, I must say, on a different note, they are my colleagues. I know them very well, and I know their capacities in dealing with situations. But unfortunately, this is not a crisis situation. and they have not been, well, maybe they have been given correct information, I don't know. But as far as we are concerned, there is no crisis. The National Assembly, the majority voted for the constitutional process to continue. It's the minority that did not vote. So if there is any consultation, I think it should be with the minority to see how they can allow the process, to continue. And it is how we are to get the process to continue. And we thought that the parliamentary process is much faster, much more reliable, much more predictable than the executive process. I believe they may also come to that conclusion.
So is it a way forward, do you think?
Well, every way is a way, but it's not a very speedy way forward. Thank you.
Sorry, I have two questions, but they are not in what we are discussing right now. I don't know if you permit me to answer these questions.
Well, once I am here, I'm at your mercy, but
Thank
also
you so much.
I think you also are very merciful people, so I think
Yeah, thank you
know how
very
to.
much. The first question is, what's your reaction on the PDOIS new mobile app launched last week? And the other question is, what's your reaction about the presidential poll? Thank you.
The presidential?
Poll.
Well, in terms of PDOIS, I think we have said over and over again that we are building up from where we left, from coalition building to party building. We were convinced that this country could not change unless we build credible coalition to at least create the first change, because the Gambian people never believed the ballot box could change a government. This country only changed through a coup d'etat, so that was an obstacle. And when we met, we felt that, well, to be able to overcome that obstacle, then since the might of the people is what decides in elections, let us help build coalitions to be able to at least achieve that change. It's a regime change of face, but at least let it happen, and people will understand that they have power to change. And of course, we attained that in 2016. So that has been together and you have development. And I believe the party is attracting people with skills and abilities, and they are willing to put their skills and abilities in the service of the party. And that's what we anticipate. We have always said that the party is a school for citizenship and leadership. That it is preparing people to know how to be citizens, sovereign citizens, and preparing people to know how to lead. Because ultimately, sovereign citizens must lead their country. And we have always said that the role of a political party is to train the people whom it can give to society and say, look, this person can be your good president, your good National Assembly member, your good councillor, and by their performance, the party is absolved that, yes, society will appreciate that the person given to us is actually delivering as expected. That's how we see political party. The presidential tour was meant to inform the people about the policies of the government and to see the impact of the policies. Don't drag us into it. We have said that, there is absolutely no attempt to change the old moment. It's politics of personality, patronage. That's what you people have seen, you know. And the unfortunate thing, people believe that some people believe that that's politics. That is the patronage, is the fanfare, is giving things, is coming to people. Look at the National Assembly. The National Assembly has passed a supplementary appropriation bill into law, so that you can build Hakalang and all these places and provide all these facilities. So how can somebody go and say, I did this? You know, it's already evident. So it means that you are the people who should inform your citizenry how a government works, that the money that the government takes from the people is what is put in the consolidated fund, and under Section 150 of the Constitution, all monies must be put in that fund. And under Section 151, you cannot withdraw that money until there is a law. Is the president the lawmaker? No, it's Parliament that is the lawmaker. That's why we have just gone through a very rigorous budget session. If one said it with your eyes. So essentially, that is what you should tell the people. This is where the funds come. What we want from a government is policy. Yes, they will have the policies. They will indicate what should be done with the money. Each government can be creative in terms of policy. And you can, yes, take credit that, well, it's our policy that has given rise to this. But that's not the purpose of this talk. So essentially, it is our duty. They are doing what they think they should do, but it's our duty to educate our citizenry rather than complain about what they do.
Finally, you talked about the adjournment debate, you know, and somebody following the National Assembly, it now want to be a culture in the National Assembly that parliamentarians are not given the opportunity to speak on behalf of their electorate, because we believe that parliamentarian is represented by a constituency, and their electorate normally send them to parliament to raise their voice, pay their voice and their ears to raise their concern. But it has been 2 occasions of the parliament adjournment debate, and motion will be passed that let the assembly sign that without an adjournment debate. And we think that, you know, this is unfair to the electorate that send the parliamentarian. What will be because we are seeing the trend is continuing. Will the parliament take a step to stop that? If you don't want to talk, then you allow other people, you know, to represent their electorate and talk on behalf of their people. I think that would be the best rather than leaving the to continue. I'm
sure you've already heard the voices have started being articulated that that should not continue, because members of parliament are sent to be the mouths of the people, to speak for the people. So every opportunity you have to speak. In fact, you should be happy. You should be objecting that you have only 15 minutes. But we understand, because we speak so much on all other issues. So therefore, when you have that opportunity, because what I'm doing now, I would have clarified during the adjournment debate. And it may not have been necessary, in fact, maybe to hold the press conference unless the media wants me to clarify more. Because I would have had 15 minutes to be able to read what I wanted to put before Parliament. But essentially, you can see the situation, that by virtue of just amputating that, many things in people's chests could not actually come out. And I've already clarified that. I've said that that mighty Parliament has standing orders, and it has a constitution. I mean, we have a constitution. It is the constitution that says that 1/4, whilst we are sitting, 1/4 can continue. It constitutes a quorum. Before sitting, 1/2 would constitute a quorum. So why should people, because they conceive themselves as majority in voting, stop a process when at least even 15 members, you know, constituting a quorum, wants to continue the process? Of course, that cannot be seen to be democratic. And I'm sure since it has happened in the first instance, it is happening again. I am sure you'll hear voices raised against that so that it never happens again.
Thank you so much, Halifa. I just want to take all my advantage I can to ask you my last question now.
Everybody is asking last question, but the last is never last. Okay, let's all accept that this is the last question. Yeah? Okay,
so
the last
we're
question.
giving our last question. So this is regarding the 54 million, which we've seen what you have tried to do on that. budget advocates, they have questioned the legality of the National Assembly to create an entirely new budget line and extending the loan scheme to National Assembly member staff instead of adding to already existing budget lines for their salaries and allowances. Is the move by the National Assembly to approve this loan legal in your views?
Well, you know, I cannot go deeper and deeper into analysis when people can go to the courts to really challenge certain things. What I can say is what is expected during the budgetary process. The Constitution is very clear. The executive is the proposer. The National Assembly or all those institutions are not the proposers. It is the executive that is the proposer. It is the executive that shows that these are the limits and this is how far we can go with expenditures. And all is put in the form of an estimate. And it is very clear in the Constitution that those estimates, when you have them, you can not increase anything except under the authority of the executive, the ministry. What you can do is cut here and put there. Now, when you cut from one item, you must also put it in another existing item. It means that you have heads, subheads, and items. So therefore, when you are cutting, you know where you're cutting. It must be something existing, and where you're going to put it is something existing. Now, what has happened in that case is something is cut from somewhere and put somewhere which does not appear to be existing. So obviously, you've heard me say that that is not credible, that it does not really enhance the integrity of the National Assembly. That's why I move my motion. So I don't think it is worth beating a dead horse. That is, everybody knows the truth, and then it's left to National Assembly members as they struggle with the implementation of what they have approved.
Mr. Salah, I believe we have one more question. This is the final question. Would you consider sponsoring a private member bill to make it illegal for the president or the executive to accept any form of donation? Would you be able to?
Well, I believe the direction of the even new constitution, I'm sure you may have already gone through it, has gone to another level. The direction has gone to another level. That is, you receive, but you remit it, you submit it as state property. I believe that that should be the direction, that all properties received in the name of being an officer of the state, it should be a property of the state. That, I think, has been, in fact, part of my manifesto when I was a presidential candidate. But I'm sure if you go and look at my handout, you will see that there. Definitely that should be. I agree entirely. Would I put in a private member's bill? I've avoided really going to that level because you need the support of your members. These motions I had to make, and that's why I made them for posterity. But there are certain other efforts that would have been desirable if you see that you will get the majority support. Then I would make it.
Thank you very much.
xam ngeen fan la skincare la 2020 lañ wax de waaw fii nag mooy Kerr fan Kerr zero tache perfect skincare saa su ne rek niñ ko dee defee rek loo lañ soxlaati rek maanaam bu dee da nga am problème ci seen skin yéen xam ngeen fan la fii ngeen di ñëw suma xarit yeeg am di jàmm yi nga xam ne taas daf lañ sonaloon xam nga doon xeesal bel laka xum éneew ma lañ ko nag waaye just in case comme ni ko gars yi di waxee rek en cas just in case loolu xew xam ngeen fi ngeen di ñëw skincare plus si yu baax rek la ñoo dox nag ay baax rek fu ne la ñoo dem ci réew mi di lañ indi rek nag products yu baax du Paris du Italie du USA du fi mu nekk nii sax boole nañ ci nag Sweden fu nekk lañ leen a indilee products bu dee tamit nag da nga ñuul rek ñu lay jamaa natural beauty that melanin dripping we do have stuff for you as well emuñ si skincare products rek ñu ngi ci cuub yi tamit fu ne la ñoo jaar in fact sax last commercial bi ñu defoon waxuñ leen woon ne dañoo dox ci ay kawar 9A grade rek nag waaw we do have bundles as well hair si lu ne la ñoo dox ñun ñu ngi ci rafetal jigéen rek luy taaral jigéen rek